Chapter 41. A dark cave. A bandaged hand, covered in tattered cloth, pulled itself up to the lightless cave's entrance. Soon after, a face which couldn't be more distorted suddenly appeared. Chung Myung, who reached out and grabbed the floor with both hands, crawled into the cave. Plum Blossom Sword Saint, my ass! What was he thinking, hiding in such a place? Did his head go mad after all that training in the mountains? Ah, right. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint is me. I'm dying. Chung Myung, lying flat on the floor, began to curse. When he realized that he had somehow made it into the cave, he strangely felt as if he would cry. That was really close. Climbing up a cliff with broken wrists wasn't an easy task. Any person with common sense would have known how dangerous it would be and given up. Unfortunately, Chung Myung was a man who had a brain but no thoughts. Right! If I didn't climb up now, I would have just wasted more time. Chung Myung yelled as he kept trying to make excuses for what he did as he lay on the floor, suffering and shifting around. This old man is dying. Actually, he is a child now. He gets so confused at times. Still, somehow, he managed to live. He made a stronger rope this time. If the rope had broken again this time, he would have really gone to see the king of the underworld. If that happened, he was sure that the king of the underworld would have a hard time holding back his laughter. Now, he felt glad he didn't die. Chung Myung, who forced himself to straighten his crooked waist, looked around. He couldn't see anything, not because his body hurt that much, but because it was too dark to see anything. This is probably... He stretched out his hand and caught onto some form of fabric. Right. Pulling the cloth held in his fingertips, it was easily swept away, revealing a light that brightened the inside of the cave. Looking at the glowing light, Chung Myung smiled. Really, I really was something else. The light was clear and brilliantly shining. One cannot light a fire inside the cave. Since the cave inclined with the entrance at the bottom, it would quickly fill with smoke if a fire was ignited. No one could drink alcohol with such acrid smoke permeating the air. To be precise, it would be possible for Chung Myung, but who would want to drink in such a place? Which is why I brought nightlight lamps and put them here. How costly they were. It's one of the offerings I slipped away from Mount Hua. In the past, so many things came in and out of the sect. Even if one or two things went missing, nobody would notice. Of course, his Sayong and the finance minister, who had to settle the bookkeeping, would have vomited blood if they heard his thoughts. What good would remembering the past do? Once again, with a calm feeling, he realized how ruthless the Plum Blossom Sword Saint was. That's me. I keep forgetting that. Chung Myung looked around at the brightly lit cave. Inside, which was neither large nor small, there was only one bed to lie down on, a small tea table, and a chest. Something felt wrong. It was weird how these things stayed the same despite the years that had passed. Is this how things end up? Suddenly, he came to realization. What if he had died without being revived, and someone from Mount Hua discovered this place in the future? Wouldn't it have caused an uproar, thinking this was a secret master practitioner's hideout? What if someone fell off the cliff and stumbled into it? The bloody cliff. All Chung Myung wanted was to hang out in a quiet place and drink, but the people of the later generations wouldn't understand that and might think there was some secret hidden here. They would think that the hidden cave was the personal hideout of a man going against the principles of Mount Hua. But aren't all the cliffs used for such purposes? Chung Myung walked towards the chest. With his hurting hands, he carefully opened the lid. The dust, which had accumulated over 100 years, scattered through the cave as the lid was lifted. Waving away the dust, Chung Myung looked inside the cave. The first thing which caught his eye was a bottle of alcohol. When he saw various liquor bottles stored inside, he began to salivate. No, alcohol isn't important right now. He despairingly pushed the bottles out of his sight and then looked at the small box remaining in the chest. This is it. Chung Myung quickly grabbed the box and pulled it out. It was a bit heavier than he remembered. Phew! Taking a deep breath, Chung Myung carefully opened the lid. At the same time, the strong scent of the plum blossom pills spread throughout the cave. It felt as if plum blossom trees in full bloom filled the surroundings. Click. When the lid opened completely, he could see round objects filling the box. From the bottom, the box was filled to the brim with pills, and sitting on top were 5 perfectly round snow-white items. Wow! An overwhelming sense of excitement caused tears to flood Chung Myung's eyes. What was filling the box wasn't just some random cushioning materials, but actual plum blossom pills. This is so crazy. No matter how common the plum blossom pills were, who would use them as cushioning? How greedy can a person be to covet them and use them like this? If his Sayong had seen this, he would have grabbed Chung Myung by the neck. Be grateful I didn't use the truly precious pills, Sayong. Chung Myung was making excuses to his dead peers from embarrassment, but he couldn't touch the most precious pill, the supreme pill. Like any other sect, it was a treasured pill that could only be handled by the highest level authority in Mount Hua. The supreme pill can only be taken out with the permission of a medical practitioner and the sect leader. On the other hand, any of the elders in the sect can take out the plum blossom pill. Of course, there were other pills more precious than plum blossom pills, and those too could only be handled by powerful elders. Elders like Chung Myung, the strongest and most powerful in the sect, the strongest troublemaker of Mount Hua. It felt like he was hallucinating and hearing voices from somewhere. For now, Chung Myung needed to get these things. With this, he would be able to heal his body. Chung Myung took the white pills, the snow plum blossom pills, from the box very carefully. He used these as hangover pills in the past, but now they were precious medicine for him. To Chung Myung, these pills were more precious than money. This is making me nervous. Chung Myung placed the box in the chest and looked at the snow plum blossom pill in his hand. A pure scent constantly flowed from this white pill. Just smelling it made his body feel more comfortable. It's said that people don't know the importance of things until they're gone. When Mount Hua stood at the top of the world, no one would even look at these pills. Only higher-tiered pills held value then. Wasn't that why Chung Myung was able to bring so many plum blossom pills with him? Not just Chung Myung, it happened all over Mount Hua. It was a natural thing. There was no shortage of pills in Mount Hua, so who would pay attention to the lesser valued ones? But now, he's in such a precarious situation. The pills he regarded so lightly have come back with a crushing weight. Oh my God, how did my life come to this? He'd rather die than suffer like this. Chung Myung gathered his thoughts and sat down quickly. He would surely have enough time to lament over things once the task was done. Now, he had to recover his body and build more strength. He crossed his legs as he sat down and threw a snow plum blossom pill into his mouth. The moment it entered his mouth, it melted without even giving him a chance to chew. A fresh scent filled Chung Myung's mouth as he began to meditate without letting such thoughts distract him. Merely eating a pill doesn't automatically increase your strength. Your strength can only be improved if the ki in the pills is properly absorbed into the body. So a subtle problem arises here. When you're young, you can't fully absorb the energy even if you eat a powerful pill. This is because children lack the ability to properly operate their ki. On the other hand, what about once you're old enough to manage your ki? The effects would be weakened because your body had already developed and created its own energy reserves. Pills are only made to fill in the ki lacking in the body, not to add to what's already full. If only people could get stronger from pills, then the Shaolin sect bastards would have been at it and become the best in the world. A young body couldn't absorb the full extent of the ki in the pills. So what about Chung Myung? I will suck it deep into the core. He knew how to perfectly manage his ki. He knew the teachings of the past and had experience. Phew. Once the pill entered the stomach, the ki began to release. Woom. The energy was pulsating within Chung Myung's body. He felt the great flow of ki, which he hadn't felt in a long time. Chung Myung felt nervous. Fill the dungeon with ki and prevent the excess ki from breaking out? That shouldn't be difficult for Chung Myung. However, what Chung Myung had to do now wasn't so simple. He had to fill the ki into his body to repair his innate true ki. Chung Myung's thick and dull mind had to act sharp like a blade, but he decided to go a step further, sharpening his mind like a needle. He perfectly controlled the pill's ki and pushed it into his danjon. Carefully, slowly, soft and delicate, as if he was handling a baby. Inside Chung Myung's mind, he held the ki in his hands and guided it. However, the goal wasn't just his danjon. It was the deepest core of the dungeon, where a pure internal ki is held in every human since birth. No, I can't. Chung Myung, who was about to push the key into his dungeon, suddenly pulled it back. It's impure. Pills were created by refining the excellent energy of spirit medicines found in nature. In other words, it can be said that these pills seek to extract and concentrate pure ki. However, although this pill was Mount Hua's pride, it was too impure to be used in Chung Myung's dungeon. If the ki inside his dungeon was like pure water coming from the mountains, then the snow plum blossom pill would be akin to stagnant water. So he decided, I'll filter it. If he could filter the ki, most of the impure ki could be discarded. Accepting the ki as it was seemed meaningless. Hadn't he come a long way to create the most complete and perfect foundation? He couldn't ruin his progress by being hasty now. Keep what's pure and discard the rest. Ki circulated through his body. Gradually, it was shaved off little by little. Impurities in the pill mixed with impurities within his body and were slowly pushed out of him. Soon, thick dark sweat began to seep out of Chung Myung's body. Chapter 42. I'm really going to die. The ki was chipped away. Chung Myung tried to make the most of what he could use, but there was nothing that could be used. It was like trying to cut out the edible part of a completely rotten radish. The ki couldn't reach the required standards and was pushed out of the body. Wasn't a pill something one used to improve the ki in their body? But now, Chung Myung was throwing it all out. If the person who made the pill had seen it, they would have died frothing at the mouth. Do you want me to lose everything? This damned foundation. Chung Myung gathered only the purest ki in his dungeon, but it was far less than he had hoped for. Even a pill that was refined repeatedly to improve its quality was deemed impure by Chung Myung's foundation. Only a tiny portion of the ki could be used. Desperately leading the handful of pure ki, he pushed it into his dungeon. Woong. Soon, the remaining essence merged with Chung Myung's ki within his dungeon and circulated throughout his body. In an instant, everything changed. Chung Myung, who was sitting cross-legged, began to float. Normally, it would be impossible for this to happen, even with a greater level of internal strength. However, because Chung Myung's ki was so pure, this phenomenon, which transcended the amount of inner strength he had, began to occur. Woong. A clear diaphanous ki went around the whole body, circulating once and again. It then began to filter out the impure energy. No, this wasn't what Chung Myung intended. He was thinking of recovering his lost ki, but the ki went against his will and started to regenerate his body. Both his broken wrists instantly reset and attached as the bruises covering his body were restored entirely like they had never been there. Shh! Sweat and impurities flowed out from his pores like a cloud of steam. The dungeon and even the blood vessels in his body began to open wider and wider. Chung Myung tilted his head. Heavenly opening? The bottom dungeon, ki, which started below the navel where the dungeon is commonly located, forcibly opened the middle dungeon in the chest, and even the upper dungeon had opened now. It was terrifying. Everything in the world must follow a proper process. A child should first learn to crawl. Maybe they could walk with some effort, but if a child learning to crawl suddenly tried to run, they would surely stumble and fail. Need to stop it. The ki was thrashing about inside Chung Myung's body. If he couldn't control it, it would continue to rage and destroy his body. The situation was quickly turning sour. Even if the process was helping his body heal, no one could be sure what the end result would be. Chung Myung struggled to block the ki. However, it rebelled against his will and moved along its own path. Shit! Listen and stop already! You're my energy, damn it! Chung Myung cursed in his mind, and the ki slowed down. It seemed like it realized whose its master was. But after a while, the ki began to run wild again. Stop! Even if blocking the ki would hurt his body, he had to stop it as soon as possible. Then right when he gathered all his will to suppress it, so are you a Taoist or a martial artist? Sahyung? It was the voice of his Sahyung echoing in his mind. Why? No, this was something he had heard in his past life. Martial artists try to oppress and control the flow, but those who follow the path of Tao let it be. You idiot. Where did your sense of logic come from? If you build a dam to stop the flowing water, it will simply flow over it. Chung Myung's body twitched. Let it be. If you leave it alone, everything will flow naturally. You wish to twist the rules of nature with the will of man? Stupid bastard. Humans are also a part of nature. How can a man compete with the all-encompassing nature? Remembering his Sahyung's words, Chung Myung gave permission for the ki to flow freely. The moment he released control, the energy, which had been violently raging, began to flow smoothly and softly through his body. As it circulated, the flowing stream grew larger and thicker, soon becoming a river that cascaded throughout his body. How long had it been? Blink. Chung Myung suddenly opened his eyes, a supremely crystalline glare, and thud. Ouch! Chung Myung, who dropped from the air to the ground, touched his hips. What? Was I floating? He never imagined that his body would float. He got up, rubbing his tingling butt. Phew! I was almost done for. It was dangerous. The slightest deviation would have paralyzed him or taken away his life. Falling off that cliff didn't seem so scary now, but the reward could be felt. Chung Myung waved his wrist. The broken wrist was fully attached. Rather, it felt more robust than ever. It wasn't just the wrist either. The impure ki. Chung Myung thought that his body had already washed away all impurities, but it was even more efficient and clean now. If he could do it again in the future, his body could reach unparalleled levels. But the most significant changes were the meridians. It felt like his entire body was open. Originally, his meridians were a small thin stream flowing into a creek, but now they were wide like a river surging into the ocean. The internal ki has also increased. Considering that a year of accumulation would only increase his ki by a fingernail-sized margin, it was encouraging to improve so much overnight. The pure innate ki has also recovered. Altogether, my danjin grew. For Chung Myung, the body is a vessel for his martial arts. If the danjin is small, then it will be limited. As he overcame a new wall, the danjin has grown, and what it can withstand has expanded. Right now, it was like a rat's tail, but still, this was the foundation Chung Myung aimed to surpass his past with. With a satisfied smile, he thought, if it wasn't for Sahyung, it would have been a disaster. Maybe he finally attained enlightenment after dying once. The words of his Sahyung, which he had always regarded as nagging, took on a new meaning and helped him when he needed it. I was just a swordsman, not a Taoist. Mount Hua was home to both Taoism and martial arts, but Chung Myung couldn't call himself a Taoist. Could he really help the current Mount Hua? Chung Myung scratched his head. Such concerns would do him no good. First, let's just try something. If that doesn't work, then try something else. Chung Myung was flustered as he walked. With each step, he was moving farther than expected, but thanks to his past experience, he adapted to it quite quickly. Click. Chung Myung took out the boxes of pills and pushed it into his sleeve. How unfortunate. Now, this was meaningless to him. He could repair and grow his body, but the pill's energy was only a catalyst serving as a medium for him. The pill itself did not contribute to his growth. Compared to Chung Myung's unique ki, it was nothing more than a lump of impurities. Things might have been better if it was the supreme pill. It felt terrible to just use the pills as a medium. Anyone other than him would have experienced a much greater effect. Chung Myung hated how things were always tricky for him. He closed his eyes to contemplate. He didn't need to feel bad. Although he didn't get much energy out of the snow plum blossom pill, he managed to achieve a result he couldn't normally get no matter how many pills he took. I'm being greedy. Chung Myung, let's only eat as much as you can handle. Chung Myung turned around. Clank. A couple of alcohol bottles that were in the chest were wrapped around his waist. It's not like he wanted to drink it. It was an action that stemmed from innocent curiosity. He simply wanted to know what alcohol aged for 100 years would taste like. Chung Myung, who finished taking the alcohol, stood at the entrance of the cave and glanced back. It feels weird. Traces of the past. Mount Hua has changed so much, yet this cave remained the same. When Chung Myung was in the cave, it felt like he was taken back in time. He missed it, and more. Chung Myung, who was silently looking into the cave, smiled. I need to come here again sometime. Not for drinking and playing around like in the past, but it was still a good place to come and rest. Well, not too often either. The past needs to stay in the past. He was Chung Myung, the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. However, that wasn't who he was anymore. Now, he was Chung Myung, the third-class disciple. Those bound by the past cannot advance into the future. The past was a milestone that would lead his life to the right place. Well then, Chung Myung walked out of the cave. Swoosh! His body felt incomparably lighter than before, and he was able to move with far more proficiency and agility than before. His light feet slammed the cliff as he accelerated upwards. Making multiple leaps and ascending quickly, Chung Myung made it to the top of the cliff. Not bad. A deep breath. The fresh air on the summit lightly caressed him. Then, as it brushed his nose, he felt nauseous. It was then that he realized that his clothes were thick with filth. Chung Myung's face frowned as he took off his clothes. What the hell is coming out of this body? Chung Myung removed his clothes, lifted them up with his fingertips, and took a deep breath. Oh my God! Nothing makes sense. Where's the nearest stream? He would have to wash the clothes before heading back to the dorm. Chung Myung turned and trudged down the mountain. On that day, the innocent animals, which had come to happily cool their throats in the stream, had no way of knowing they would suffer a tragedy lasting several days to come. Chapter 43. It's cold. Dawn on the mountain is distinctly different from dawn on the plains. When cold air meets the humidity of dawn, it creates a chill that penetrates the bones. Walking through the early morning air, the third-class disciples left the dorm and headed to the training hall. I'm wide awake now. I'm wide awake too, but my body doesn't wake up at all. I'm so tired. You should have meditated. Who does that at night? Ah, right. While exchanging idle conversations, the third-class disciples took out their sandbags and stone bags from the hut prepared at the side of the gymnasium. By the way, how long do we have to do this? Well, maybe until we are asked to stop? Who will ask that? You don't know. All the disciples thought of one face. That monster-like bastard. A scary jerk. Although they were all disciples of the same class, Chung Myung had completely subjugated them. Since the training was difficult, some rebelled occasionally. However, once they were knocked into the ceiling of the dorms, they quickly settled down. Jogul, the first to go against Chung Myung, and even Yoonjung weren't complaining, so how could the others rebel? The disciples couldn't even think about surpassing Jogul and Yoonjung, who were better than them. From their point of view, even those two were monsters. But isn't he a bit weird these days? What? He doesn't look well, and he doesn't come to train either. Right. In the beginning, Chung Myung would participate in the training and torment the others, but he didn't even show his face in recent days. Then, is it true? Is what true? The rumors that he had overloaded his internal ki. Ah, no way. No, think about it. He's getting thinner and weaker each day, and he doesn't seem to be in good health either, so he keeps skipping the training. Well, maybe it would be different if he was lazy, but he isn't. Isn't it strange that a guy who trains 3 times as much as any of us suddenly stopped coming to train? When you put it like that, it makes sense. All the disciples present were listening to the exchange. Then, someone said something that shouldn't have been said. Do we even still have to train? The faces of the third-class disciples suddenly hardened. Actually, their feelings were no longer the same as they were at the start. In the beginning, they went to train because they were forced to, leaving them with aching bodies and discontent. But now, they realized that they were getting stronger through the training. Although it was unfamiliar to physically train the body rather than cultivate their ki, they could clearly see their growing results. Their lower body had become more stable. Is there any greater joy for a martial artist than growing stronger? Although their bodies were tired and weary, they began to appreciate and enjoy the training. But as soon as they heard that, the feelings they had been holding back began to take over. I can't take a leave every day, but... No, just once. Excessive training isn't good either. I don't think it would be bad to reduce it. Everyone's thoughts changed. Maybe if Chung Myung isn't here... Their poisonous thoughts continued until they reached the training hall. The early morning, which was taken for granted, suddenly felt more annoying with these thoughts seducing their minds. Well, they were children, so it was inevitable. Look, he isn't here today either. Is he really badly hurt? Then, can we just back out? The decisive blow. There were precisely 3 reasons why the disciples followed Chung Myung. First, even if all the disciples rushed in, no one could take down Chung Myung. Second, Chung Myung had the support of Eungom, the overseer of their dorm. If a disciple steps out of line and can't be controlled, you should bring it up with a superior. But what can you do when the superior is on their side? And finally, Chung Myung was weirdly reasonable. When it came to training, he was a demon that would attack others and crush dissent. But he didn't bully the others or make them do anything unreasonable to benefit himself just because he was stronger. Because of that, they preferred how things were now rather than when they were disciplined under Jogul. But now, the first of the 3 reasons collapsed. Can't we back out? He is already just skin and bones. Wouldn't we win if we all worked together? Their eyes began to shine with determination. Seeing that, Jogul sighed. Sahyung, let them be. Yunjong smiled. They'll see the truth soon enough. It was then. Ki. Everyone's head turned to the side as the door to the White Blossom Training Hall opened. Only Chung Myung was missing. In other words, it had to be Chung Myung coming. No one other than him could be coming here to train. The door opened wide. All the third-class disciples turned their heads. Eh? What? It's so dazzling. Something was shining brilliantly. Those who fought against the light and glanced at what was hidden within opened their eyes wide in shock. Chung Myung was coming. Yep, it was definitely him. But the man they were seeing wasn't the same as yesterday. Clearly, Chung Myung was... What is with him? Did he put oil on his face? Did he pick up some wild ginseng and eat it? The third-class disciples doubted their eyes. Until yesterday, he was withered and weak. Even dying wouldn't have seemed strange, right? But now, he looked healthy, and there was a weird oil-like glow on his face. We're done for! We'll have to train now. It was a nice dream. The disciples thought their dreams had flown away just as quickly as they arrived. Chung Myung, who walked in, stood in front of them and spoke. Gentlemen, this instructor of yours can't help but feel sorry for you. I have been so ill that I neglected your training these days. I feel deeply responsible for this. No. It's fine. Things happen. We're fine. We're fine too. They all desperately screamed at the weird words Chung Myung was saying, but he shook his head and continued with a somber look. No, you practiced so hard even in my absence, but I couldn't live up to your expectations. This is definitely a mistake on my part. The atmosphere kept getting weirder. He shouldn't be acting like this. Is he really saying such things? Hearing it felt quite ominous. However, Chung Myung made a decisive declaration. Even if I can't undo my past mistakes, I can make up for what I did. If the training was lacking, then we need to practice more. That bastard! I'd rather die covered in shit. I'd rather try and kill him. Curses quietly poured from the surroundings, but Chung Myung didn't care. So, I hope that you too do not forget that the future of Mount Hua lies in your hands and work diligently. So, Chung Myung pointed up, which made everyone look where he pointed. He showed Lotus Peak standing proudly. Everyone was silent. Start. First come, first serve. The half who arrives last will need to do it again. Everyone was silent. Aren't you going to go? At that moment, someone shot out of the crowd like a bolt of lightning. The faces of the disciples who confirmed the person's identity were shocked. Great Sahyung? Yunjong. He was running to the Lotus Peak as if the soles of his feet had caught fire, and someone was following right behind him. It was Jogul. No, Great Sahyung! Hey, run! Hurry! If we're late, we need to run again! Run! With that, the rest of the disciples began to run at full speed. How can he recover like that overnight? How could I know? Sahyung, didn't you say we should all try going at him? A gentleman should know how to embrace the right timing. Now isn't the time. Well, I'm freezing to death. What? Sahyung! Sahyung! Run! Please! All the disciples began to run. Only when they did their training right would they be able to eat their meals. They would have to run on their arms instead of their legs if they had to run a second lap, which was why everyone struggled to get there first. Everyone ran with tears of blood streaming down their faces. They didn't know what happened, but Chung Myung was healthy, which meant there was no hope for them. Their rebellion was suppressed before it even started. Looking at the backs of the running disciples, Chung Myung smiled. What cute bastards. They dared dream of rebelling? His body had become more sensitive as he reached a higher level, so he heard everything they had said. Well, this is good. There's a limit to what a submissive person who only knows how to listen can accomplish independently. Mount Hua never accepted such people, but that didn't mean they took in overly rebellious ones either. There was nothing worse than people who constantly complained about everything. In Mount Hua, you needed to have the ability to match your confidence if you wanted to speak freely. That ability, I will create it for them. Chung Myung smiled. It was important to be as strong as he was in the past, but he alone wouldn't be able to bring back the lost glory of Mount Hua. It was because Murim wasn't influenced by a single person. Countless people rose to the top of the world through their own strength, but their names would fade if their successors didn't manage to carry on their legacy. In the end, for a sect to maintain its reputation and be famous, all members of the sect need to be strong. The reason the Shaolin sect is known to be the best isn't because of any individual person in it. Even the sect with the strongest warrior cannot defeat the Shaolin sect alone if his allies are weak. Even Mount Hua in the past couldn't stand against it. But not this time. Chung Myung's eyes shone. In the past, he had to follow the methods of his Sahyungs and Sasuks. But this time, he could rebuild Mount Hua in his colors. It will be a long and difficult journey, but in the end, it will be grander than in the past. Of course, his Sahyung wouldn't like this. If it makes you sad, then come back to life. After giggling, Chung Myung put his hands around his mouth and shouted, "The last person back has to skip breakfast today!" A viciousness that even a devil may cry over. Chapter 44. A raspy gasp that scattered dust into the wind echoed. Jogul's body wriggled and writhed about on the ground as he struggled to catch his breath. That was crazy. There was no strength in his body. The sky was shining yellow as his consciousness seemed ready to drift away at any moment. If he was like this, what about the others? He lifted his head and looked around. A total defeat. Not a single person could stand. No, it wasn't that they couldn't stand, but they were all motionless on the floor like corpses and gasping for air. Only Yunjung was sitting on the floor with his back held straight. Sahyung. Respect welled up in Jogul's heart. In fact, in terms of martial arts, Jogul was a little better than Yunjung. Jogul was definitely ahead of Yunjung in swordsmanship as well. However, at this moment, Jogul realized why Yunjung was the great Sahyung. It was hard for Jogul to lift even a single finger, but Yunjung, who had preserved through the same training, was sitting calmly and catching his breath. It wasn't a matter of skill, but of mental strength. How could he not respect such a Sahyung? On the other hand, Jogul turned his gaze to the other side. Okay, more. In Jogul's eyes, he saw the figure of Chung Myung constantly squatting with sandbags 3 times his size. Hey, why are they so light? Hey, if you're done with training, come give me your weights. What? Why are you all lying down? What a monstrous bastard, Jogul grunted. The training they were being made to endure was unreasonably extreme. Chung Myung must have felt too excited after recovering from the recent days of rest as he pushed the third-class disciples into this new training. However, there wasn't a single person who objected to him. This was because Chung Myung was training 5 times harder than anyone else right before their eyes. Anyone with common sense would keep their complaints to themselves. Even if they were full of dissatisfaction, they would keep their mouths shut to avoid looking like an idiot in front of others. Chung Myung, who was training more than others, continued to train without showing any signs of hardship. Is it that time already? Thud. He threw the sandbags on the floor and then said, "What is all this? Kids these days are so weak. You lack determination. It wasn't like that when I was a kid." "You're the youngest one here." How can the youngest one call the other disciples kid? Today's training ends here. All you have to do for today is eat and attend afternoon training. Those who doze off or do something else during the training will be made to do twice as much tomorrow. Devil, demon, bastard. Everyone cursed him in their minds, but nodded their heads nonetheless. Then, let's go in. Organize the training equipment properly. As they watched Chung Myung walk into the white Plum Blossom dorms, the third-class disciples sighed in unison. Meat. Meat was visible. These days, Mount Hua is awash with money. Meat can be seen at every meal, and seeing the new chef, it looked like the sect had even hired new staff. All of them were looking at the meat served on the table, but not a single person touched it. Eat, Yunjong said weakly, but no one raised their chopsticks. I feel like I'll vomit if I eat. To think that I would want to puke when seeing meat on the table. Is this my time to die? No one could bring themselves to eat. Great Sayong. What? Isn't this too much? Yunjong didn't answer, but that didn't make the others stop. No, I mean, it is good for us to practice. Actually, it's true that we haven't been concentrating on training ever since we first came to Mount Hua, and I understand it is better to train properly than waste time clumsily. But, however, this new training is too much. There isn't a single part of my body that's unhurt. It seems like the others felt the same way. We might die at this rate, Sai-Hung. I was able to hold out before, but these days I feel like I would die for sure. When I enter my room, I fall asleep like a corpse. Every time I lay down, I'm afraid I might die in my sleep. I can't even lift my chopsticks. My hands keep trembling. Yunjong sighed. But wouldn't Chung Myung listen if Great Sayong is the one speaking? You are the Great Sayong. Yunjong frowned. You aren't entirely wrong. In the past, Yunjong and Jogul spoke about this. But right now, he couldn't hold back. Yunjong was reaching his limit too. Fatigue builds up during training. In order for the next training to be effective, you need to rest and relieve that fatigue. Recently, though, Chung Myung pushed everyone without giving them a chance to recover from their fatigue. Yunjong felt like he was pushing his body to the limit every day. At the very least, didn't he go to the morning practice in fear? Yunjong glanced at Jogul. Gul. Yes, Sahyung. What do you think? Well, as Jogul was asked, everyone focused on him. Among the third-class disciples, Jogul was the second in rank. Honestly, it is a bit unreasonable, right? My body is struggling to continue. The problem is that it's getting more intense each day. I welcome intense training, but this is too harsh. Steel gets stronger the more you hammer it, but the human body breaks when beaten. Then, what should we do? The problem is... Jogul took a moment to compose his thoughts. No, Chung Myung should know this too. Yunjong groaned. He had the same thought. The training right now made no sense. However, Chung Myung should know that this sort of training is overdoing it for them, because it's Chung Myung. For now, I think it would be better to hold on a little longer. If nothing changes after a while, then we will talk to him about it. Let's do that. When the conversation between Yunjong and Gul ended, everyone agreed. First of all, it was necessary to calm down the protesters. Let's eat now. Even if you can't eat, push it down your throat. We have practice in the afternoon too, and if you give a weak performance, Sasuk will punish you. Okay. Thank you for the food. Everyone picked up their chopsticks with weak hands. Seeing their faces, Jogul felt bad. Jogul struggled as he went to bed that night. I think I'm going to die like this. It was tough to bathe. Whether he was covered in grime or not, he just wanted to rush to bed and stretch out his body. But he praised himself for washing his body and clothes despite feeling that weak. Thanks to this, his eyes felt heavy and there was no strength left in his body. It was amazing that he was able to walk. Slump. Jogul, who fell on the bed, sighed. It's back to training again once I wake up. In fact, Jogul wasn't dissatisfied with the training. He thought that he could endure it no matter how harsh it was, because in the end, all this training would make him stronger. But lately, he was growing doubtful. What if his body broke down first? Will his body be able to survive this training? Before the questions deepened, Jogul felt ashamed. He quickly forced himself to stop thinking and let his fatigue drift him off to sleep. Sahyung! Sahyung, get up! Sahyung! Jogul opened his eyes. A human figure hazily entered his vision. Who is it? A heavy hand was pushing down on Jogul, who was about to get up. Don't make a fuss and get up silently. Chung Myung? What was this crazy guy trying to do by breaking into Jogul's room? How did he open the door? What is it? Jogul struggled to get up. He felt like he had slept quite a bit, but the fatigue didn't disappear. His body was still heavy. At that moment, Chung Myung offered him something. Here! Seeing the small pill placed in Chung Myung's hand, he frowned. What is this? A vitality pill. What? Shh! Jogul, who made a loud noise, shut his mouth. It wasn't easy to get this. I'm giving it to you because you're Sahyung. Really? You think I'm deceiving you? You'll know it's real just by smelling it. It is real. A little while ago, the pure scent pricked his nose. Yet, the reason he questioned it was because he couldn't believe it. A vitality pill. It was a pill that enhanced internal ki and purified the body. It was said that in the Murim world, people would even kill sects and families for it. Even if this pill wasn't the best, it could be more valuable than gold if it could even slightly increase the body's ki. But such a pill was being given to someone else. It isn't poisoned. No, I didn't think that. Jogul took a deep breath. Why give this to me? Why don't you use it? Because Sahyung needs it. Hurry up and eat it before anyone else finds out. Also, it is absolutely secret that I gave this to you. It is only for Sahyung. Jogul couldn't speak. Could he really have it? If it was the normal Jogul, he might have questioned it more. But now, he was struggling with fatigue and fighting to keep his mind awake. The pill appeared to be real as well, so he reacted on instinct and accepted it from Chung Myung. Just eat it. I will help guide you. Can I really have this? I'm giving it to Sahyung. Chung Myung tossed the pill in his hand, and before Jogul could react, the pill went down his throat. As soon as it entered his mouth, he could feel it melt and fill his body with pure energy. He could instinctively tell that this was a real vitality pill. You should guide it, but don't absorb it in a hurry. You should take your time and slowly absorb it over a month's duration. Ah, I get it. Turn around. I'll take it from here. Jogul felt moved and looked at Chung Myung with slightly watering eyes as he turned around. Looking at Jogul's back, Chung Myung smiled a wicked grin. You have to give water to a thirsty person to make them feel grateful. He was already curious about what kind of eyes his Sahyungs would show him at the training tomorrow. Chapter 45. The next morning. No, it was embarrassing to call it morning. The door to the dorms opened wide. It's morning. So tired. I'm dying. It was the beginning of a day that was not so different from usual, and nothing seemed strange. But obviously, something was different. There was a subtle strength in the steps of those who were dragging their feet like corpses. What's more, the fatigue-filled voices complaining weren't the same as before. And there was unfamiliar emotions in the eyes of those around. Come on, I should practice hard today. Well, right, it will be hard. It may be hard, but you have to work hard. Everyone went to the warehouse without a word and brought back the equipment they trained with. Phew, it's light. I seem to have a lot more energy in my body. Is it fine for me to be the only one to receive it? I feel bad for the Sahyungs. Sajat Chung Myung must like me a lot to give up such a precious vitality pill. All the Sahyungs warily looked around. If the others find out that I received the vitality pill and ate it without them, wouldn't they be disappointed? I feel bad, but a vitality pill isn't something that can be shared. Did anyone else get one too? Each of them kept thinking. Since Chung Myung told them to keep it a secret, they wouldn't even think of saying it by mistake. Although they all had awkward expressions on their faces, the third-class disciples of Mount Hua never thought that all the disciples had gotten a pill each. Why? It's simple. Vitality pills aren't something that can be obtained in large quantities. It would take more than 1,000 gold to feed all the disciples a vitality pill. Even if you had the money, there's no guarantee that you'd be able to find someone willing to sell so many pills. And why would Chung Myung buy so much just to give it away to others? Such a precious vitality pill was given to me. Ugh, I feel hot. Moreover, those who had taken the vitality pills realized the efficacy of the medicine. Warm energy constantly rose within their bodies. The ki hasn't even been fully absorbed yet, but just a little was enough to blow away some of their fatigue and improve their internal ki. Their motivation was revived. Thud. The door to the training hall opened and Chung Myung walked out. Seeing him arrive, the disciples lined up. Seeing that, Chung Myung smiled. Nice. Bright and vigorous eyes. The eyes of the disciples, which were staring at him, sparkled with a light that shone brighter than dawn stars twinkling in the sky. Why wouldn't they be? For Chung Myung, it was useless to eat the vitality pills himself, and selling them would be a waste. From their point of view, though, it was a priceless treasure they would normally never be able to obtain. If the disciples knew that the vitality pill given by Chung Myung wasn't some generic purchased pill, but was instead made by Mount Hua in the past, the reaction would have been even more intense. He turned out to be such a good guy. The effect is so great. Such a precious vitality pill. Loyalty. The disciples looked at Chung Myung with warm eyes. So warm that even Chung Myung felt a bit embarrassed. So this is why my Sahyung occasionally gave out vitality pills to the ones who didn't listen to him. He realized that handling people required more than just a whip. Now, shall we get a clean start today? Oh, Chung Myung pointed to the Lotus Peak. Let's go there. Wah! I'll become number 1 today. Move it, I'm coming through. Seeing the Sahyungs rush for the peak, Chung Myung laughed. It's gonna be comfortable for a while. It's strange. Eungeum's eyes narrowed. In front of him, the third-class disciples were wielding wooden swords as usual. It wasn't any different from what he had seen so far. However, Eungeum's sharp eyes noticed a subtle difference. The sword is stable. It was the same swordplay, but the sharpness and stability were different. Eungeum's eyes, looking at the disciples, narrowed further. The lower body has changed. There is strength in the feet. Because greater force in the feet was applied, the upper body became more stable. Since the upper body was under better control, they could place more weight on the tip of the sword. A good thing. If the tip of the sword is steady, doesn't that mean they were accurately deploying the technique? It was a significant change, considering that the reason for practicing and honing the same technique countless times was to develop perfect control of their swordsmanship. But there was one thing bothering Eungeum. Is it possible for such a significant change in such a short period? According to Eungeum's calculations, it should have taken more than a year for them to reach this level. It's really short, considering they did this in a month's time. Realistically, it wouldn't be strange even if they took 2 or 3 years. But, ta! The swords cut through the air. What? And now, the advancing steps on the floor was cleanly executed. Huh? Eungeum exclaimed. It was a good thing that the disciples' achievements had increased, but he couldn't understand how it had happened. Was it the morning training? Eungeum's eyes turned to Chung Myung, who wielded his sword in the back. That was the only reason he could think of. He didn't even have to think too deeply. It was after Chung Myung's arrival that the disciples began training more. To be precise, it was after Chung Myung started the morning training. Eungeum's frown deepened. Was the training that effective? Eungeum allowed the training because the third-class disciples were willing to practice on their own. Of course, Eungeum, also wanting some training time for himself, was a more realistic reason. I thought it would be a little more motivation for them. Was the effect too great? It was too extreme. Moreover, the disciples also realized that their skills were increasing, so they were more excited than ever to engage in training. It felt strange. How long had he been looking after the kids of the White Plum Blossom dorms? To finally see the disciples' eyes shining so brilliantly. This is embarrassing. The disciples trained so enthusiastically, but did Eungeum ever have such passion when he taught them? Didn't he constantly feel bothered by the work placed on him? Eungeum sighed. Even though I knew that they were Mount Hua's disciples, and that they would determine our future, I was negligent in caring for them. The more he thought about it, the more ashamed he felt. Ashamed for not being the pillar the disciples needed him to be. Ah! The disciples' swords All pointed to the sky in unison. Seeing that, Ungum nodded his head. Great, a word resonating from his heart. Your swords look so lively. He didn't know what more to say. Ungum's gaze turned toward Chung Myung. It was weird. Mount Hua hadn't changed much in the past, but since Chung Myung arrived, constant changes have been occurring. The financial problems plaguing the sect was solved without any fuss, and the disciples were practicing with a passion. Besides, didn't he see that their skills were improving? Was this all a coincidence, or... Ungum opened his mouth. As you all know, according to the rules, you are supposed to learn the Tai Flummox sword. After seeing you all work hard, I think I should break the rules and pass on the technique in advance. Oh, Tai Flummox sword! Ungum smiled, seeing the disciples cheer. Rewards were given to those who work hard, and those who receive awards worked even harder. If this cycle can be encouraged, these children will grow well to represent the Mount Hua Sect. So don't be lazy and keep practicing. Yes, sir! Okay then, back to training. The lively words resounded through the hall and Ungum smiled. It was then someone approached the hall with quick steps. Is Ungum here? Ungum turned his head in surprise. Sect leader. Ungum adjusted his expression and looked at Hyunjung with curious eyes. It was rare for the sect leader to visit the training hall. You've worked hard. I have something to speak with you about. Could you spare some time? Yes, sect leader. Ungum turned to the disciples and spoke. As for your swordplay, do it again. Seeing Hyunjung arrive so suddenly, Ungum was puzzled. Leaving the children behind to continue their training, the two elders went to the other side of the hall where Ungum waited for Hyunjung to speak. Ungum. Yes, sect leader. A problem has come up. Huh? Hyunjung took a book from his sleeve and handed it to Ungum. Ungum, who received it, asked, This is... It came out of that chest we found. Ah. Ungum, who noticed that Hyunjung was beckoning him to read it, began to read in haste. Sect leader, this equilibrium of six technique. Yes, it is. Ungum frowned. The equilibrium of six was the foundational technique of Mount Hua. However, it was replaced with the true equilibrium of six. But why are you... Have you read through it? Yes. When I read it the first time, I also hastily glanced through it because it was a hectic situation. Huh? Check the last chapter. There is something written there. Ah. Ungum hurriedly opened it. Soon, his face contorted upon seeing what was written there. Ungum's hands trembled. There was a letter. To the successors. It isn't wrong for one to develop and transform the martial arts of Mount Hua. Martial arts need to be constantly changed and developed to be effective. But the equilibrium of six is the basis of Mount Hua, the backbone of Mount Hua. Transforming or changing the equilibrium of six is no different from changing the essence of Mount Hua. One should keep this fact in mind, my dear successors. Chapter 46. What is this? Ungum, who was shocked, stared blankly at Hyunjung. Hyunjung gazed off at the distant mountain, seemingly at a loss for words. Equilibrium of six? As if his mind was tangled, things seemed out of order. The equilibrium of six technique is the most fundamental lesson taught in Mount Hua and was supported for many years. Just as those who hold a sword for the first time must learn to grip it, just as those who learn to read must memorize the words first, all the martial arts in Mount Hua began with the equilibrium of six. But time has passed and things have changed. Mount Hua was no longer in a situation where they could afford to teach a slow technique with a methodical approach. They had to prepare things faster and advance quickly. Wasn't that why everyone put their heads together and invented the true equilibrium of six sword? Unlike the equilibrium of six, it can be learned faster and is more practical for new recruits. Sect leader, haven't we all come to a conclusion together that we had to move faster for Mount Hua? Right. But this... Hyunjung let out a sigh. That's why I came to hear your opinion. As you said, it was the will of Mount Hua which redefined our foundation into the true equilibrium of six sword. But the words of our ancestors are also important, right? Ungom nodded his head. It wasn't some advice given randomly, but the words of their ancestors which laid the path for them. All sects work hard to follow the path set by those who came before. So how could they deny the clear will of those who built the sect? What do you think? How can I? You teach the children of Mount Hua. When it comes to their future, I can't help but consider your opinion. Don't think about anything unnecessary. Simply speak from your heart. Ungom took a deep breath. It is difficult. Whether to follow tradition or choose to change was something people always contemplated because it wasn't a question that had a correct answer. Sect leader, the reason we created the true equilibrium of six sword technique was that we didn't have much time in Mount Hua. Right. In the end, the original method took time. Who didn't know the superiority of the original technique? However, Mount Hua didn't have the time to leisurely raise their disciples. Right now, they were on the verge of collapse, so they couldn't opt for a slow method. Which is why I ask you, do you believe Mount Hua has a future now? Hyunjung frowned, as this was a difficult question too. Future. Mount Hua has just solved one of the most horrendous problems. Although it was the most urgent issue, many problems still remain. There isn't an easy answer. Please understand that it cannot be answered clearly. Sect leader. As if he had made the decision, Ungom opened his mouth. Then, I'm against it. How come? Because it isn't easy. Ungom sighed. Although the two techniques came from the same root, they were still different. In the first place, the fundamentals that they taught were different. The equilibrium of six was slow and methodical, gradually developing the individual's foundation by advancing one step at a time. On the other hand, their new technique allowed rapid advancement and quick growth, but it lacked stability. Children learn quickly. These children have already learned the martial arts with their bodies. It will be difficult to overwrite what's been taught and reteach them from the ground up. Failure to do so properly may have disastrous results. Above all else, it takes a stable lower body and strength from the past technique. It's too late now. Ungom shook his head. I don't think that the words of our ancestors were wrong. If possible, I would also like to follow their instructions. But realistically, that is impossible. That's what you really think? Yes, sect leader. What did you say was necessary for the equilibrium of six? A stable lower body and strength. Ungom blinked dumbfoundedly as Hyunjung turned his head to observe the children's training. Stable lower body. Strength. Their training seems to have gone well, hasn't it? He didn't train them like that. Was it because of that child? Ungom looked at Chung Myung, who was swinging his wooden sword in the back. No, this situation was complicated, but it seemed too unreasonable. Chung Myung wasn't from a martial arts family, and there was no way he could have predicted it in advance. It seems to me that the children wouldn't have much difficulty in relearning their techniques, right? Well, but the children might get confused. Ungom, isn't it our job to manage the chaos and confusion as we lead them down the right path? Ungom nodded his head. Is it the children who are confused, or is it you? Sect leader, could you give me a moment? I want to ask one of the children. One of the children? It isn't me who will be learning the technique. To truly know the best way, I think it is better to directly ask the children who will be learning the martial arts. That's a good idea. Teaching is something that flows from top to bottom. The one receiving the teaching would be the children. What they think is also important. Then Yunjong. Chung Myung. Before Hyunjung could finish, Ungom called loudly for Chung Myung. Chung Myung, who was swinging his sword, flinched at the sudden call. Come here. At those words, Chung Myung lowered his sword and approached the elders. You called? I have something to ask you. Yes. Ungom exhaled and opened his mouth. Which do you think is better, going slower and higher, or faster with certainty? Hyunjung, who listened from the side, had an expression of disapproval. The question was too cryptic. It wasn't asked in a way a child would understand. Ah, right. It's Chung Myung. This child certainly had a unique side to him, so maybe he could understand and come up with an answer. As if in deep thought, Chung Myung frowned. Then, as his thoughts cleared up, he raised his head and looked at Eungum. Going higher is the better choice. Why? Because it's Mount Hua. Eungum looked at Chung Myung with a stiff face. The corners of his eyes twitched as if the answer was shocking. Because it is Mount Hua. Eungum slowly turned his head and looked at Hyunjung. Hyunjung had closed his eyes. It wasn't difficult to guess what he was thinking, although his thoughts couldn't be entirely understood from just his expression. It didn't matter if the answer was right or wrong. The important thing was that the answer came out of this child's mouth. Right, we are Mount Hua. What they lost was Mount Hua's pride. Fragments of that distant past were now flowing from the mouth of the youngest child in Mount Hua. Any other sect can choose the latter, but not Mount Hua. In order to restore the glory of the past and make Mount Hua's name resonate around the world, we cannot compromise with reality. It was an answer which cut directly to the heart of the matter. Although Eungum asked a cryptic question, Chung Myung answered while revealing his hidden intentions. It was something the adults should be ashamed of for trying to directly avoid. Do you mean we shouldn't compromise because it's Mount Hua? I see. Eungum nodded. Go back and train. Yes. As Chung Myung went back, Eungum sighed. But before he could speak, Hyunjung spoke. I am ashamed. Yes, sect leader. To hear such words from a child. Because it is Mount Hua. Because it is Mount Hua. Who in Mount Hua could even say such a thing in our current situation? Hyunjung closed his eyes. Even he, the sect leader of Mount Hua, was unable to say anything. He had hesitated to answer when questioned about the future. Perhaps Chung Myung could answer so innocently because he was a child who didn't know. But the important thing was that the answer had left him feeling ashamed. Mount Hua. Mount Hua. Sect leader, Eungum said. It may be the words of a child, but a child is someone who can't be swayed aside by reality. I know. It may be difficult, but I don't want to fall short of the child's expectations. Hyunjung let out a sigh. It wasn't a small matter. Determining the basic techniques of the sect was vital, but even more important was selecting the direction Mount Hua would take in the future. The small conversation grew like a snowball, urging Hyunjung to make a choice, a decision of which path Mount Hua should follow. Listen, Eungum. Yes, sect leader. In the name of Mount Hua, as of this moment, the basic technique of Mount Hua will be changed to the equilibrium of six sword. I will follow your orders. I will give an official order in consultation with the elders, but before the official order comes, I want you to understand it and pass it on to the children. Yes. Eungum's eyes turned sharp. Mount Hua is Mount Hua. It can't stay as a poor sect anymore. If they are under the name Mount Hua, they should be the best and aim for the best. Even if one is trapped within a small stream, they must wait for the day that they can ascend to heaven and become a dragon. That was the duty of those who bear Mount Hua's name. Not just that one technique. You need to consider all the martial arts of Mount Hua. Your role as the head of the White Plum Blossom Dorms will be more important than ever. Yes, sect leader. If we can repay the kindness we received from Mount Hua, what more could we wish for? Hyunjung smiled as he looked at the kids. These children are the future of Mount Hua. Perhaps not in Eungum's generation, but by the time these children take the lead, they may be able to redeem Mount Hua's name. For that ideal, there was nothing that Hyunjung wouldn't do. Perhaps the ancestors were watching from above and smiling at him with pride. Clearly. Pathetic bastard. Chung Myung, who had returned to his training spot, clicked his tongue. It seemed like the two elders couldn't even come to a simple decision on their own. Did you really have to ask me that? That? I put a meal in front of them and now they are asking me how to eat it? Ugh. Why are you sighing all of a sudden? Do you know what I mean? Nope. In response to Jogul, Chung Myung frowned. I need to think. These idiots can't do anything right. He decided to head down to Hwaum. He was worried about how these people were handling the businesses down there. If he left it to the sect leader, Chung Myung was certain Mount Hua would die for sure. This sect would never make a comeback if not for me. What is with him, Sahyung? Leave him be. This isn't the first time or second time he's been like this, right? It was a moment that caused everyone to sigh in unison. Chapter 47. After a long period of hardship, peace had come to Mount Hua. The financial problems, which plagued Mount Hua the most, were resolved through Chung Myung, and new martial arts were provided, allowing the sect to move forward. Just as spring comes when winter passes, Mount Hua's vitality was blossoming like a vibrant spring, and everyone was lost in blissful happiness. At least that's how it should be. Peace my ass! Chung Myung's face contorted. The broom he was holding bent as if broken as he clenched his hands tightly. Peace? It was chaos. Calculation? Wait, Jogul-sahyung, how much is this? That, be careful. It all depends? It depends on the items. A refund? The third-class disciples of Mount Hua, who had white robes on, were profusely sweating as they dealt with a rushing influx of customers. Shit! It was pure chaos. It was good that the ledger was found and the businesses returned to Mount Hua. Since they acquired 10 new businesses that were profitable and doing well, wasn't the only thing left to do was to just sit back and make money? That naive thought was the beginning of all the problems. Chung Myung hadn't even thought about it, but these people had no experience running a proper business for nearly 100 years. So, an awkward situation arose where greenhorns, who had never earned a single penny on their own, were now in charge of running 10 businesses. And the result, as seen. No, I already said I ran out of ingredients a while ago. Why aren't more coming? What the hell are you doing? What is that idiot doing grabbing the customers? Hey! Chung Myung tried to smile. Do well. The disciples of Mount Hua, who did nothing in life but train their bodies and swords, came down to Hwaum and were sweating hard dealing with customers. If the ancestors saw this scene, they would have a few stern words. No, they would have grabbed the elders by their necks and flung them around wildly. Among the disciples was Chung Myung. The customers, of course, did not respond well to his performance. No, what kind of tea is this? Tea comes from leaves. Don't you know what tea is? How can you call this tea? How can you just mash the leaves in the pot? Where is the owner of this place? It was a living hell. Chung Myung sighed as he looked around. Well, this was better. The third-class disciples, who began working for the first time, experienced hell. No, the people who were here to do business were going through hell as well. A guy selling silk accidentally rips the cloth. A man asks for a rod and gets a pickaxe. The third-class disciples, who were only serving customers, were enough to torment the flow of business, and the upper-level staff of Mount Hua felt like they were losing their heads. Those who have spent their whole lives on the mountain teaching now lacked the common sense of how things worked outside of Mount Hua. Hey you, what are you doing? Get to work. Yes. Chung Myung soon began to sweep the pavilion again. Sweep this, sweep that. All the customers are going home anyway. In Chung Myung's eyes, he saw all the guests storming out the doors, stamping and throwing dust in their wake. Seeing their displeased faces, as if to spite his hard work, he wanted to yell. I want to crush them completely. But he couldn't do as he wanted, because he was the youngest of Mount Hua. Chung Myung just brushed dust aside with the broom and slowly fell back. Jogul, who was busy carrying refreshments, stood out. Sahyung! He didn't listen. Sahyung! Jogul continued to act as if he couldn't hear. Hey, jerk! Were his ears blocked? Jogul, you bastard! Yes, the third-class disciple, Jogul. What? Jogul glared at Chung Myung. He was still just a Saje and the youngest at that. Talking nonsense and insulting a Sahyung wouldn't be tolerated. What? Jogul glanced around and then approached Chung Myung. Sahyung. What? Let's just speak as humans, with no ranks dividing us. I've heard that you are the youngest son of a famous merchant. The youngest son of the continent's greatest something or other. Continent my ass. We're just a small merchant family. Still, you have to be able to see what's going on and understand. The youngest son of an influential family is an immature problem child, but secretly harbors an otherworldly talent just waiting to be utilized. Isn't that how it usually goes? What the hell are you talking about? Jogul took a deep breath. He couldn't understand what Chung Myung was trying to say. You see? Chung Myung pointed to the scene of chaos. How the hell did this happen? Jogul sighed. Do you remember the people who used to be in charge of this place? Yes? It turns out that they had pretty good reputations. As those people moved or quit, a lot of their employees quit with them. Huh? Reputation? Those scamming bastards seemed popular with their employees. Reputation? What sort of dogshit is that, Sahyung? To be precise, it seems that they were too thorough with their relationships and ties. Most of the employees who worked for them were their relatives or family members, so they immediately quit. Shit, is this the downside of a family-owned business? What? This was why professional managers... no, forget it. So this is an employee issue, right? That's only the first thing. Huh? Do we have more? Jogul subtly frowned and then looked around. Confirming that there was no one listening in, he said, As you can see, the biggest problem is that the adults of Mount Hua don't have the ability to run these businesses. Is that a problem? Those who live without studying and those who spend their lives on the martial arts tend to have difficulties making a living. It isn't as easy as people want it to be. If it was easy to make money, then everyone would be rich. Yeah, that's right. Chung Myung took a deep breath. So, now Mount Hua is incapable of managing these businesses? That's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but it is like tying a pearl around a pig's neck. I didn't expect it to be this bad. It was then a loud voice was heard. No! I asked for pu'er tea. Why would you bring this instead? Isn't that what it is? This is oolong tea. Sahyung, I'm already in a ton of trouble. Do you want me to die? How can you suddenly change it? Why are you raising your voice? As if I ever had to deal with such an expensive tea before. I obviously wouldn't know anything about it. Who here would ever have the chance to drink it? Chung Myung shook his head. People were fighting merely over the change of tea leaves. See? Jogul clicked his tongue. You have to choose a good product. Then you need to have good materials to make the product. If your materials are too expensive, then the cost may exceed the returns. And if you choose to use cheap materials, then your customers won't trust the product. And if we start learning the business now, would you want to teach a 40-year-old geezer with no experience martial arts? I wouldn't. Jogul shook his head and continued. Honestly, I think that if it continues like this, we will be ruined in less than half a year. I don't know what the old Mount Hua was like, but the current Mount Hua doesn't have the ability to operate these businesses. But wouldn't learning it make a difference? Jogul looked at Chung Myung with a blank face. Chung Myung, look, do you know the characteristics of our current businesses? It is all about bringing things in and selling them off. Okay. Silk, cloth, metals, tea, etc. All of them require materials so they can be made into a product to be sold. Do you know where I'm going with this? If I could figure that out, wouldn't I be rich? It's said that each material chosen can influence the prosperity of a business. Consider that. Then, if a naive disciple who knows nothing of the world or money tries to purchase the raw materials from a wholesaler, what do you think would happen? We'll be ripped off. Not just that, they would suck the bones dry too. Forget it. This was bound to fail from the start. Chung Myung turned his head, looked at the distant sky and smiled. Sahyung. He only now realized his Sahyung's greatness. All these businesses operated effortlessly with him in charge. Damn it. I'd rather die than suffer, Chung Myung thought. Then what's the solution? Jogul looked at Chung Myung. Why are you asking me? Sahyung is the child of a merchant family. There must be some solution, right? You idiot. If there was one, would I be sitting around like this? If I had the ability to do it, I wouldn't be at Mount Hua at all. I would have already inherited the family business and made a fortune. Is this situation that severe? There's no solution. Jogul had a bitter smile. At least, I would have tried to contact my home, but it's too far away, and my household couldn't afford it. To smoothly run an operation like this, we would need a giant, knowledgeable in all kinds of goods, but there isn't anyone like that in Mount Hua. There used to be one, his Sahyung. But now? Jogul spoke with a wry smile. If only Master Huang was fine, we wouldn't have to worry about this. Master Huang? Yes, Master Huang. Chung Myung tilted his head. Come to think of it, this man called Master Huang gets mentioned frequently. Who is he? A huge merchant. A huge merchant? Jogul nodded his head. He's one of the merchants based in Shaanxi. He handles things from Yunnan and the West too. But what does that person have to do with Mount Hua? He supported Mount Hua for a long time. It is a famous story. Because of him, Mount Hua wasn't completely destroyed and was able to keep afloat. I don't see him here. Well, I don't know, but... Jogul shrugged his shoulders. I heard that he supported not just Mount Hua, but also many other places. Anyway, if it were him, there wouldn't be any problems. We could have requested advice and gotten a lot of help. Then we just need to ask him for help. No, Master Huang has been sick for a year now. There's even a rumor that he's in a coma. So... Chung Myung, where is Chung Myung? Chung Myung raised his head towards the voice that was looking for him. Over here. A familiar face came into Chung Myung's gaze. Chapter 48. There you are. Eunam approached Chung Myung with an urgent look upon his face. Sasuk, I greet you. Jogul and Chung Myung bowed their heads and offered greetings. Right. Eunam slightly nodded his head and then looked at Chung Myung. Chung Myung. Yes, Sasuk. I think you should head to our main mountain. Huh? Our main mountain? Mount Hua? No. Does he think going to Mount Hua is that easy? What kind of errand is he asking about? Even birds could die ascending Mount Hua. Where did their consciences go? Mount Hua? Yes. Chung Myung turned his face to the side with a sullen face. Jogul swiftly avoided his gaze. No, there are so many vigorous and strong Sahyungs. Why me? Aren't you the youngest? Because I am the youngest. My legs are thin and my footwork is weak. You also aren't doing anything here. Ah. He didn't like working, so he decided to clean this place instead. Who would have known it would backfire like this? Ugh. Chung Myung sighed deeply. Now he was turned into an errand boy. How did the Plum Blossom Sword Saint Chung Myung end up like this? So what's the errand? You need to deliver a letter to the sect leader. Sorry? A letter? He wanted to ask more, but questioning a Sasuk and fretting over every detail wasn't polite. It hurts their pride if someone young like Chung Myung questions them. Yes, I'll go. Good. Normally, it would be fine to just wait until someone is returning and let them deliver it, but the businesses here are quite chaotic, and it's a fairly urgent matter. I hope you understand. Shit! He even has such a good personality. Chung Myung would have torn their snouts off if it had been a third-class disciple issuing this request. Eunam pulled out a letter and gave it to Chung Myung. This is the one. Yes. Also, Eunam kindly explained what the letter was, in case Chung Myung was curious about it. This is a letter from the Eunha Merchant Guild, so treat it with respect. Huh? Eunha? Jogul quietly explained. That's the merchant association that Master Huang is a member of. Eh? Chung Myung was shocked. Eunam continued to explain while ignoring Chung Myung's shock. This letter was sent to the sect leader because of an emergency. I happened to be in Hwaum, so I was able to intercept it early. Otherwise, it would take another 2 days for it to be delivered along with the other goods to Mount Hua. So, you will have to take this and deliver it to the sect leader immediately. Yes, I understand. It's urgent, so don't delay and leave right away. Yes. Jogul, who watched Chung Myung take the letter into his hands, unwittingly reached his arms out as Chung Myung dashed away towards the mountain. That... Then he mumbled with anxious eyes. Couldn't we send anyone else but him with that? Did you say something? Nothing at all, Sasuk. Jogul quickly said, but his eyes didn't leave Chung Myung's back. I'm probably just feeling too sensitive. But Omnia's premonitions were rarely wrong. Chung Myung, who was climbing Mount Hua, took the letter in his hands. So this is a letter from Master Huang of the Great Unha Merchants, right? No, since Master Huang is battling illness on his deathbed, this must be a letter from his subordinates. Really? Chung Myung sighed. Morally, it isn't right for a Taoist to open letters meant for other people and pry into their private matters. But isn't this letter addressed to Mount Hua where Taoists are plentiful? Whether sect leader or disciple, it should be fine for me to peek inside since we're all family on Mount Hua. Isn't that right, Sahyung? What shit are you spewing? However, my Sahyung is dead, so it doesn't matter. Chung Myung always touched others' stuff. With Mount Hua's businesses as they are, it seems like they will remain a mess unless Master Huang steps in to make things easier. But with this situation, was there some kind of emergency in the guild? Something must have happened to Master Huang. How could he know for sure if he doesn't take a peek inside though? Chung Myung took a close look at the letter. An inscription on the surface clearly stated, "For the eyes of the great Mount Hua Sect leader only." So they say no one other than the sect leader should open it. It's okay. It's fine. To be honest, even if the sect leader was here, he would have told me what it says anyways. If other people were around to hear him, they would have pulled their hair out yelling at him. Unfortunately, no one was around. Let's see. A letter sealed securely with a wax stamp. No matter how clearly it was torn, marks were bound to be seen. But it wasn't very difficult for Chung Myung, who had plenty of experience raiding other people's property. Well, that's a good thing. Shh! A sharp key rose from Chung Myung's fingertips and accurately separated the boundaries between paper and wax. Then, as if it had never been waxed from the beginning, only a complete envelope remained. Chung Myung opened the envelope, took out the letter inside, and began to read it. Let's see. Chung Myung crossed his legs and scanned the contents. Chung Myung's face distorted. Chung Myung fought back an urge to crush the letter, neatly folded it instead, and pushed it back into the envelope with trembling hands. He took a deep breath. Phew. After taking several deep breaths, he calmed his raging mind. Isn't this that damn demon flower? Demon flower. Literally a demon's flower. Chung Myung clenched his teeth. There's just no way ordinary physicians can cure this, because these were the symptoms of that flower. On the surface, the symptoms are similar to being severely poisoned. Therefore, people would spend their time searching for an antidote. However, the demon flower is a poison that occurs when a particular technique of the demonic sect is used. The reason why Chung Myung couldn't be calm was simple. Demonic bastards! Those bastards, who he thought had been eradicated, were alive and working behind the scenes. No. Chung Myung slapped his cheeks to calm himself. The one I killed was their heavenly demon. I didn't kill all the demonic bastards. It was natural for the remnants of the demonic sect to be alive. Didn't they say the demonic sect remnants had rushed over to Mount Hua after their heavenly demon was killed? There must have been some who survived the war and grew up. There would have been even more hiding out in the 100,000 mountains. It's no wonder they're still around. The problem wasn't them being alive, but them plotting something. A blazing fire ignited within Chung Myung's eyes. I don't get it. Do they still hold any grudges against Mount Hua? Why does everything they do damage Mount Hua? There were so many people in this world, yet why did they have to touch Master Huang? Ugh, my head hurts. Chung Myung took a deep breath. Nothing else can be done. He would have to go and see it for himself. It wasn't possible to say with certainty based on what was written. Chung Myung would have to see it with his own eyes. Furthermore, reward! A huge reward! At the end of the letter, what was written shone in Chung Myung's eyes. According to Jogul, only the best of the best could join the Unha Guild, and Master Huang was famous even in the guild. A massive reward from such a place. He couldn't even imagine how much it would end up being. I can't miss this. Chung Myung's heart skipped a beat. Nearly 100 years have passed, so not many would know of the demon flower. If they hadn't waged war 100 years ago, not even Chung Myung would know of it. There was no way they could imagine that these symptoms came from a demonic technique. Anyone who could recognize these symptoms died in the hands of the Heavenly Demon and the other demonic sect disciples on the day Chung Myung died. But the world doesn't know. Those who survived that fateful day might know. If they were alive, they would have been a sect leader, but it didn't seem like there were any survivors. But if they had survived, would they have passed the knowledge on? What if one of the others receiving this letter actually has a cure? I must have lost it. I can't even imagine this. Chung Myung's eyes flared in excitement. Who could try and snatch away one of Chung Myung's opportunities? Was he really shamelessly targeting patients? But this was money. No, Chung Myung must solve this dying man's illness for the sake of morality. I'm busy. Chung Myung grabbed the letter and placed the seal back on it, then melted the wax a little to fix it and moved to the top. Let's give this to them first. That way, even if Chung Myung resolved the situation, the sect leader would have some understanding of the current situation. Hyunjung seemed to have close ties to the guild. The letter read thusly: Sect leader, the long winter is over and spring is coming. By the time this arrives, the spring plum blossoms will be in full bloom, even where the sect leader resides. The beautiful view of Mount Hua, which I visited with my father, is still etched into my memories. I am full of desire to revisit it sometime, but it is a pity that circumstances do not permit me. Unfortunately, I am ashamed to be writing to you like this in hopes of a request. I am contacting you because my father's condition keeps worsening with the passage of each day. As you know, my father has been in bed since last year as his health began failing. Considering his age, it was understandable. But strangely, in recent days, other symptoms started to appear instead of the usual signs of old age. Father is currently unconscious and unable to move. His body is dyed red, and a black light or something ominous circulates on his forehead while his heart beats erratically. We, the Unha Guild, invited various people to check on my father's condition, but no one made a proper diagnosis. So, as if grasping at straws, I'm trying to find some clue about this illness by sending these letters out to anyone I know is capable. If you know anything about my father's symptoms, we would appreciate it if you could contact us back in any way. I promise to give a massive reward in the name of the Unha Guild to those who provide information that would help improve my father's health. Waiting for a reply. Hwang Jong-gi, the minor lord of the Unha Guild. Chapter 49. I can't do this anymore. The third-class disciples groaned and passed through Mount Hua's gate. It was impossible for them to do business in Hualem. These Taoists need to achieve peace through meditation. They couldn't relate to those obsessed with worldliness and fleeting desires. Everything is fine, but... It was understandable. They also understood how important money was and how hard it was to earn. Until recently, weren't they forced to endure by surviving off only porridge due to a shortage of money? Even if they were Taoists, it was impossible to live off the bark of trees and cultivation alone. Whether it was a mountain, a field, or a city, people needed money, so they had no complaints there. The problem was, can we just get a dorm in Hualem? What kind of treatment is this? If we have to go up and down Mount Hua each day and night, I really might die, Sa-hyung. Yunjong closed his eyes tightly. Usually, he would have yelled at the children to stop their whining, But he didn't say anything because even he was out of breath now. Think of this as training. What kind of training? If not, go to Sasuk directly and ask him. Everyone shut up immediately at that. It wasn't because they were afraid. It was because their suffering was insignificant compared to the hardship of their elders. They only did it today, but the elders had been going up and down the mountain every day for the businesses. Sahyung, I have no time to train these days. We are here to learn martial arts, not do business. If it was going to be like this, I'd rather have stayed home and not joined Mount Hua at all. Yunjong sighed as the whining kept going. I know what you're trying to say, but things don't always work the way you want them to, right? That's just how it is, so endure it for now. Yes, Sahyung. All right. Still, everyone nodded their heads. Yunjong sighed once more in secret. That's what I said, but when will this situation get better? He couldn't imagine. No, it wasn't that he couldn't. In Yunjong's eyes, things wouldn't get better. Rather, they would worsen. Fortunately, the merchants who sided with Mount Hua came to their aid. Otherwise, they would have already experienced dramatic losses. For things to get better, the path to improvement must be visible. But Yunjong could only see bad things. Sect leader must have a plan. As Yunjong continued his thoughts, he flinched. I'm worried about Mount Hua. Until recently, that was rarely the case. Although he was one of the third-class disciples, he barely worried about Mount Hua. It was because he had always thought that even if Mount Hua collapsed, he could simply go elsewhere. But before he knew it, he had grown seriously concerned for it. This is all because of the change that occurred after he showed up. Sahyung! Yunjong closed his eyes tightly. Everything has been changing for the better, but why does that guy keep getting more and more immature each day? Yunjong looked at Jogul, who was running towards him. Sahyung, we are in trouble. Calm down. You are a Taoist, so don't rush and be... Chung Myung. Chung Myung? The moment that name came out of Jogul's mouth, Yunjong's face turned a ghastly pale. It was truly amazing how one name was enough to shake another to their core. No, you need to see this. Hurry. As Jogul started to run ahead, Yunjong followed behind without saying a word. What is he up to this time? Yunjong didn't have time to think. He ran with all his strength and followed Jogul into the dorms, swiftly rushing into Chung Myung's room. Not here. He's not here. An empty room. Is he out? No, that isn't it. Look at this. Huh? This? Yunjong narrowed his eyes and looked at where Jogul pointed. A sheet of paper? A sheet of paper was left on the bed with a message written on it. Something came up, so I'll be away at work for a few days. You guys can handle it. Also, if you skip training, I'll fold your spine backwards, so don't even think of skipping out. This crazy bastard. Yunjong's hand trembled. What? A few days? Did that madman think he could run around anywhere he wanted? What do we do, Sahyung? Yunjong sighed. First, we need to make sure the others stay silent about this. But if he gets caught, even if we go and tell them, it won't change anything. He said he'll be back in a few days, so we need to try and hide his absence until then. Unless it was the same as today, when someone came searching for him specifically, nobody would notice if Chung Myung went missing for a short while. What will happen if we get caught? Are you worried about that? Yes, aren't you worried about it? I'm worried about something other than that. What? Yunjong sighed and spoke. I'm worried about how many days he'll be gone and what new mess he's going to cause this time. Jogul, who was at a loss for words, agreed in his mind. Oh, I need to take a breather. Chung Myung sat down on the tree trunk next to him to catch his breath. He ran a great distance straight from Mount Hua without resting, and he was out of breath. It seemed like he would die. How far have I fallen from my prime? He could jump from one mountain to another in one step. He could even jump from one side of a river to another in 2 jumps. If it had been him in the past, it would have taken less than 2 hours to reach Xi'an City from Mount Hua. It would have been like taking a leisurely walk. However, Chung Myung couldn't do it at his current level, so he had to run like a crazy dog, sweating until his body hurt. Oh my, if I could have just one glass of cold water, life would be worth living. Each time this happened, he would think of the past. Taking a deep breath, Chung Myung raised his head and looked at Xi'an. It's been a long time since I've been here. Although Huam developed quite a bit, it cannot be compared to Xi'an City. Xi'an was the largest city near Mount Hua. As a result, whenever there was a need to visit a big city, the first place anyone would consider was Xi'an. Chung Myung, feeling alive and rested, stood up while reminiscing. Quite a lot used to happen here. Ordinarily, the disciples of Mount Hua wouldn't come here. The reason was simple. The closest faction to this city was actually the Jungnam Sect. Jungnam Mountain, home of the Jungnam Sect, was only a few kilometers away from here, so their disciples would often come here when they were bored. What would happen if the disciples of both Mount Hua and Jungnam met? One of the two will be destroyed. Jungnam Sect and Mount Hua weren't on good terms. No, it's not enough to say that they simply weren't on good terms. They just couldn't bear being close to each other. They were closer to being enemies. Why do they have such a bad relationship? It has to be asked the other way around. What reason do they have to get along? Like how neighboring nations don't have good relations, the big sects never liked getting along with their neighbors. First, there are always border disputes and interests to be contested. Not to mention a constant competition to recruit local disciples with talent. Above all, when asked who's mightier, swords are drawn and wielded before the question finishes escaping their lips. It's a matter of pride. Moreover, both Mount Hua and Jungnam were from the same province, and they even had the same kind of teaching, which focused on swordplay. The ancestors must have had similar personalities. Maybe they thought that if they settled their clans near one another, their descendants would get along. Well, that may be what they thought, but the successors came to regard each other as enemies. As a result, Mount Hua had no choice but to reluctantly get along with the Jungnam Sect. At least, that was until Chung Myung appeared. As everyone knows, Chung Myung has quite a temper and is more than a little rebellious. The more his sahyungs tried to stop him, the more he wanted to come to Xi'an. Were there disputes? Of course. I hit them quite a lot. Chung Myung wasn't such a bore that he would visit the city just to pick fights. At that time, he only focused on eating one more piece of meat and drinking one more glass of alcohol. He couldn't enjoy himself and indulge in drinking and dancing within Mount Hua because of his ever-present sahyung's watchful eyes keeping him tied down. But he could avoid his sahyung's nagging by hiding in the city. However, those Jungnam fools seemed to enjoy fighting rather than drinking and dancing. After being beaten by Chung Myung once or twice, whenever they found out that Chung Myung was in town, they would come rushing after him. Chung Myung acknowledged the Jungnam Sect's tenacity as well. Regardless of how many times they were beaten to a pulp, they would always come back, chasing after Chung Myung in greater and greater numbers whenever he showed his face. Even when Mount Hua was in the midst of collapse, weren't they still trying to drag Mount Hua down tenaciously? So, Chung Myung glanced at his clothes. He couldn't take off his uniform because he was in a hurry. The plum blossom symbol embroidered on the chest stood out brilliantly. Should he get a change of clothes? Chung Myung was a little worried. Whatever. He doubted that he would run into those damn bastards in this wide city. It isn't like they would be searching for him as they did in the past. It's not like anything will happen. Once he got to the Unha Guild, he wouldn't have to worry about this sort of thing. And then I can get my money. With a sinister smile, Chung Myung crossed into Xi'an, completely unaware of the storm he was about to create. Chapter 50. Hwang Jung-gi couldn't hold back his disappointment. So you're saying that it can't be helped? Hwang Mun-yak was Unha Merchant Guild's prominent leader and Hwang Jung-gi's father. With every passing day, Hwang Mun-yak's health continued to deteriorate. Until recently, he was at least conscious, but a couple days ago, He ceased even waking up as the severity of his symptoms increased. An unconscious man couldn't even eat food to nourish his body. If this continued, it was clear that his breathing would end within a few days. In a hurry, Hwang Jung-gi had invited influential people the world over. Now, he had even begun to seek help from prominent Taoists whom he had a relationship with, but not a single answer had come back yet. Today, he had a glimmer of hope when a figure of the Shichuang Tang family who boast about their knowledge in poisons came to him. However, what happened had left Hwang Jung-gi wallowing in disappointment.
It is difficult.
Unsurprisingly, Hwang Jung-gi sighed at the negative comment he heard. Are you saying that even the sect known as the Master of Poisons is unable to help my father?
It is true that we pride ourselves as the foremost experts on poison in this world. We can assist in matters related to any poison. But your father's malady isn't caused by poison.
Hwang Jung-gi narrowed his eyes at this statement. You're saying that even after seeing these symptoms? Chung Myung, the elder of the Tang sect, shook his head.
Although the symptoms are similar, this hasn't been done by poison. There seems to be a fundamentally different cause.
Hwang Jung-gi's complexion darkened to the point where it couldn't get much darker. Even though he invited the best and most influential people in their fields and wielded his financial power to promise the greatest compensation he could, he still couldn't find someone to cure his father's illness. Are you sure that this isn't simply his age catching up to him?
These symptoms aren't natural.
Then what the hell is going on? Chung Myung slightly lowered his gaze, visibly troubled. Seeing that, Hwang Jung-gi sighed. I am sorry. I know that you did your best. I'm just a little frustrated.
I am sorry for being unable to help.
No, not at all. Forgive me for not seeing you off. Chung Myung got up and left outside with a bitter expression.
What am I supposed to do?
Hwang Jung-gi held his head as he mumbled. His father's illness was getting worse day by day. How could he stop this? Despite having so much money, was he unable to do anything for his father? What sin did my father commit for this to happen? Hwang Mun-yak had devoted his life to helping the poor. He knew that heaven's will is not necessarily executed in retribution, but wasn't this too harsh? To die after suffering from an unknown disease for over a year. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. May I come in? Ah, yes, Elder. The door opened, and a man came in. It was a white-haired man in an impressive white uniform. I just saw Elder Chung Myung leave. Yes. Young master, I am embarrassed to keep saying the same thing, but now is the time to admit it. The only way to save Master Hwang is through Taoist rituals. Hwang Jung-gi's face grew bleak upon hearing what was said. I understand what the elder is saying, but I don't want to rely on it just yet. Young master, didn't I tell you? The elderly's symptoms are because he went against the flow. He collected too much negative ki and twisted his foundation. If you can make the decision to let us handle it, there might be a chance. Hwang Jung-gi turned his head and looked at the man. The man nonchalantly continued, as if the gaze piercing him wasn't burdensome at all. It isn't common for the sect leader of the great Jungnam sect to personally offer help. This privilege is only being extended to you because he is Master Hwang of the Unha Merchants Guild. Time is running out. Please, don't do anything you will regret. I wish to wait longer. There's no use. The man clicked his tongue. It was as if he considered Hwang Jung-gi's actions to be pathetic. Hwang Jung-gi bit his lower lip. The reason he ignored this man's rude remarks was simple. This man here was the Jungnam sect's elder, Ki Mok-sung. The Jungnam sect has been famous as one of the 10 great sects for a long time, and in recent years, their name has soared to even greater heights throughout the world. He wasn't sure about this generation, but Hwang Jung-gi was sure that this sect would occupy the highest peak at the top of the world within the next few generations. Besides, Xi'an is a place that has been under the influence of the Jungnam sect since ancient times. With the elder of such a sect offering to help them, Hwang Jung-gi couldn't afford to sever their ties and had no choice but to refuse politely. They will probably ask for a fortune in return. Giving money wasn't the issue. If they could really save his father, he was willing to give up all his possessions. However, if they had the confidence to save his father, they wouldn't have asked for the payment in advance, but would ask for it later after truly saving him. Having lived his life with his father as a merchant, Hwang Jung-gi knew what the other party would aim for in this situation. We haven't yet received replies for the letters I sent out. I will make a decision after receiving the responses. This is really frustrating. How could they cure this disease when all those doctors and healers you've already invited failed? Did you not hear a word the Tang sect elder said? Hwang Jung-gi's eyes twitched. This man spoke as if he had heard the conversation between Hwang Jung-gi and Tang Myung. He might not have realized, but didn't this man just admit to eavesdropping on them? Shameless. Hwang Jung-gi sighed deeply. Unfortunately, he lacked the confidence and strength to point that out now. If Hwa Mun-yak's condition deteriorates further, his role in the Eunha merchants will shrink. Then, it would be necessary to maintain a relationship with the Jeongnam sect, which holds great influence within the city, even if that meant that he would have to use a lot of money. I asked for a little more time. It isn't that I lack faith in the Jeongnam sect. It's because, as a son, I hope to do something more for my father. There isn't much time left. If he dies, you shouldn't forget that it was the result of the young master's vain obsession. Hwang Jung-gi clenched his fist. I'll keep that in mind. It was then, Young master! An urgent voice came from outside. What's going on? Mount Hua! A man has come from Mount Hua! Mount Hua? Yes, from Mount Hua! Hwang Jung-gi's eyes trembled. He did send a letter to Mount Hua. However, since there wasn't much to expect from a sect on the verge of ruin, he sent the letter rather late. Judging by the time, the letter must have only reached them 1 or 2 days ago. Yet, they already sent someone here. Perhaps. Did they know something about Hwang Mun-yak's symptoms and decided to send a person rather than a letter? Hwang Jung-gi, who saw a ray of hope, was about to get up from his seat when he heard a cold voice. Mount Hua? Kim Ok-sung's eyes opened wide. His expression hardened by the word Mount Hua and then let loose a harsh voice. They're merely a ruined mess. What can they even do? How dare they come here? Hwang Jung-gi bit his lip. He knew that Kim Ok-sung was speaking with his sect in mind, but Hwang Jung-gi had the impression that this man was speaking as if the Jeongnam sect was already in control of the Eunha merchants. Young master, there's no need to meet such people. What does Mount Hua know that would allow them to cure this? Hwang Jung-gi's face hardened. Even so, they traveled here after receiving my call for help. Do you think that I would send them away without even properly greeting them? You need to listen to me, elder. Hwang Jung-gi cut him off. This is the Eunha Merchants Guild. Don't forget, this isn't the Jeongnam sect. Kim Ok-sung tried to hide his discomfort, but Hwang Jung-gi ignored it and got up. He hurriedly opened the door and went outside. We never know. No one in the world could even name the disease. Even famous sects had given up on helping them. Then, maybe, just maybe, the answer would come from an unexpected place. Hwang Jung-gi came out and looked around. Where are the guests from Mount Hua? Hwang Jung-gi's subordinate deeply bowed while responding. At the entrance. Are you saying that you left visitors who traveled from afar at the gate? What sort of disrespect is that? No matter how horrible the situation within is, such rudeness is unacceptable. Hwang Jung-gi yelled with a fierce bellow. The subordinate didn't ask for forgiveness and simply looked at the gate. I was going to ask him to come, but I couldn't understand that situation at all. Move, I will go there myself. Young master, but... Hwang Jung-gi's face hardened as he moved. He didn't like his subordinate's awkward attitude. Since when did the Eunha Merchants Guild divide their guests according to status? If his father was conscious, he would have scolded everyone involved. Those who do business should treat everyone equally. Master Hwang's theory was that those who divided customers by their names and status weren't qualified to do business. People might say that the might of Mount Hua had weakened, but it was rude to ask them to wait at the gate when they came to help. I need to set things straight. Hwang Jung-gi resolutely moved to the entrance. Soon, a small child, leaning with his weight on one leg, came into his sight at the entrance. Well, it really is Mount Hua. The pure white robe and the plum blossom pattern on the chest. This kid was undoubtedly a disciple from Mount Hua. Hwang Jong-gi looked at Chung Myung and spoke. We have been rude. The young man raised his head slightly. No, well, yeah, you were. I am Hwang Jong-gi of the Eunha Merchants Guild. It was my negligence for not properly educating my subordinates, so please, hold me responsible. It's fine. I didn't come here hoping to be treated well anyways. Wasn't this answer a bit too old-like? Hwang Jong-gi continued, maintaining his expression. Thank you for your understanding. But what about the others in your party? I came alone. Ah, I see. The party... Sorry? Hwang Jong-gi shook his head. What are you saying? I said that I came alone. The young man shrugged his shoulders, smiled mischievously, and spoke. I have a way to cure Master Hwang, so please guide me in. Oh, and I'd like to check out the huge reward that you mentioned. Is that fine? Hwang Jong-gi's eyes trembled. Who the hell was this little bastard? This was the first meeting between Hwang Jong-gi of the Eunha Merchant Guild and Chung Myung.